الله الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا ومرشدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد Amma ba'd, all praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our creator, our sustainer, the one who has created everything that we see around us and all the things that we don't see and that have been created. He provides us with our food, our drink, our shelter, the air that we breathe. Everything that we have has been given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We exist because Allah Ta'ala decided that we should exist. And this is something that we should all be aware of at all times. That Allah Ta'ala is our creator, that He sustains us, and that He is watching us and He is listening to us. And of all the things that He has given us, and He has given us many things, of all the things that He has given us, perhaps the greatest thing that we have is Iman, this belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There are many people who have been created by Allah. They receive sustenance from Him. And yet they have not recognized their Creator. How unfortunate that is. But Allah ta'ala has blessed us with this recognition. That we recognize Him as our Creator. And so we must thank Him and we should do everything that we can to please Him. Allah Ta'ala has provided us with guidance and we have the Qur'an al-Kareem, the noble Qur'an that He has sent down as guidance for us. And we've been hearing from Surah Al-Baqarah, the second chapter of the Qur'an, the chapter of the cow. We heard about the story of the cow before. And we heard in the first part of the surah, in the first 1¼ ajza, Mubarak, that we heard about the Banu Israel, the people who came before, the mistakes that they made. And Allah Ta'ala recounted those mistakes so that we might learn from them. So that we might hear their mistakes, what they used to do in their time, when the reminders came to them, how they responded, and so that we might learn from those mistakes. It's not so that we can point at them and say, oh, how silly they were, what were they thinking? Because we also make mistakes. They were human, we are human. But we have been guided by Allah Ta'ala. Allah Ta'ala has given us this Qur'an. And so we should ensure that we learn from the mistakes of those who came before. As-sa'idu man wa'adha bighayri. The lucky one, the happy one, is the one who takes a lesson from other people's mistakes, so that he doesn't have to make the same mistakes. Allah Ta'ala has given us so many lessons. And then we started the second half of this chapter, of this surah, where Allah Ta'ala then gives us some advice on how to behave, how we should actually live our lives. And there are some ahkam, some rulings in this part of the surah. So we've heard about fasting, and how Allah Ta'ala has made it obligatory upon us to fast during the month of Ramadan. فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ. Whoever witnesses the month, whoever from amongst you witnesses the month of Ramadan, then he should fast it. But of course, fasting and sawm meaning to abstain, but what does abstaining mean? What does staying away mean? And there are other nations who came before who had different types of fasting. We see in some of the riwayat, some of the narrations, the Jews, the Banu Israel, they only fasted on the one day. And that was the day when Fir'aun was drowned. And that was out of thanks, as thanksgiving to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for saving them from that evil tyrant. And then we see other narrations where the Nasara, the Christians, used to fast for Ramadan, but they also used to fast for an extra few days, an extra 10 days. And then another king came and he received some benefit. And so then he decided to add on 7 days. And then another king after that came and he thought, well, why are we fasting only 47 days? Let's make it 50. So then they made it 50. And we see that Allah Ta'ala tells us also in the Qur'an that those people used to make their leaders into their gods. In that they used to allow their leaders to change their rulings, their sharia. But of course, we don't do this. Our rulings that Allah has given us are in the Qur'an, they're in the Hadith, they're in the Sunnah, and that's all we need. And then we heard about how Allah is very close. That when a person asks anyone, that where is Allah? Is He close so that I might whisper to Him? Or is He very far away so that I need to shout out to Him? Then no, say, فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. Allah says, tell this person who is asking that I am near. أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِي إِذَا دَعَانِ. I answer the caller's call when they call. فَلْيَسْتَجِيبُوا لِي. So let them ask of me. وَلْيُؤْمِنُوا بِي. And let them believe in me. لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْشُدُونَ. So that they might be guided. Beautiful ayah. Allah is near, He is listening, He is watching. And He wants what is best for us. He loves us dearly. Think of the love of the mother for the child. And then think of the source of that love. Can you imagine? How much Allah Ta'ala loves His creation. And so when one of His creation calls out to Him, day or night, and seeks from Him, then of course Allah will give. And we also heard from the hadith that we narrated last week that every dua is accepted. As long as it's not something that is evil, or asking for something that is wrong or bad, or as long as it's not something that calls for breaking of relations, then every dua is accepted. We may see the reward of that dua in this world, or we may see it in the akhirah, where Allah Ta'ala gathers those dua together and then gives the reward on the Day of Judgment. So this person in this world thinks my dua is not being accepted. But he perseveres, he continues to make dua in the hope from Allah Ta'ala. And then on the Day of Judgment, when he wakes up, then he will see so much gathered for him. And he will ask, where has all this come from? I didn't do this many good deeds. And he will say, no, this was the dua that you made. Or Allah Ta'ala answers the dua by saving a person from an evil that was going to afflict that person. So they were going to be harmed in a certain way. They were destined for this. But this person made dua, so Allah Ta'ala saved him from that calamity. Of course, if the calamity doesn't befall us, then we don't know that it was going to happen. But Allah Ta'ala will have saved us. And then Allah Ta'ala tells us how He has shown us mercy regarding this fasting. And it's worth looking back at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, how the Sahaba radiallahu anhum used to fast. At the beginning, their fasting was that they would fast all during the day. So they would not eat or drink or go close to their wives. And then at the time of iftar, between iftar and isha, they were allowed to eat and drink. That was it. If a person fell asleep, then that was it. They couldn't eat anymore. They were not allowed to eat after that until the following day after Maghrib. So, once, one Sahabi, his name was Qais ibn Salma. He was working hard in the fields around Medina. He was very, very tired and he was absolutely exhausted, you can imagine, and he was very, very hungry. and he'd been fasting during that time. He comes home at the time of Maghrib, when it's time for iftar, and he asks his wife for some food. She says, there's nothing in the house at the moment, let me go and find something. During the time that she had gone to find some food, he fell asleep. He couldn't keep himself awake. His eyes closed and he was finished. So then his wife comes back with some food, however much it was, and then she wakes him up and she says, what have you done? You've gone to sleep, that's it, it's over. You can't eat anymore. And so the narration says that he had to carry on fasting. But he hasn't done iftar. He was very hungry. So the following day, during the day, he fainted. And so then the Prophet ﷺ saw him in this state, and afterwards we see the ayah that has come down. So this was the way the fasting was at the time. Also, we know that in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, at the beginning, when they used to fast, they were not allowed to be intimate with their wives for the whole of Ramadan. And of course, many Sahaba found this very difficult. And so they used to make a mistake. They would become intimate with their wives, and of course they felt really bad about this afterwards. But of course they were human. And some also found that they couldn't stop themselves. They were very hungry, and so after Maghrib, after Isha, when they should have been fasting, they would eat something. So this was a great test for them. You can imagine before this they hadn't fasted at all, there was no fasting. So this was a great test for them. And Allah saw this, He knew this. And so He sends this ayah down as a mercy for them. So Allah Ta'ala says, أُحِلَّ لَكُمْ لَيْلَةَ الصِّيَامِ الرَّفَثُ إِلَى نِسَائِكُمْ. Being intimate with your wife, having intercourse with your wife, has been made halal for you during the night of the fasting. So it was made halal. It hadn't been before. So this was a great mercy for them and a great relief for them. هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنَّ. A really profound ayah here. Allah says, they are garments for you, they are clothes for you, and you are clothes or garments for them. What does this mean? When a person thinks of his clothes, what do clothes do for us? They cover us, they cover the things that we need to cover, or that we want to cover. If a person has any blemishes on their skin, then they want to cover them, and they do this with their clothes. So, a husband and a wife cover each other's faults and defects. None of us is perfect. But there are certain things that we would rather not share with the whole world, that we'd rather keep secret. But of course, in the husband and the wife's relationship, these things will become apparent. But these people then hide each other's faults. And so this is a lesson for us as well, that if our husband or our wife has certain defects, certain things that aren't quite perfect, then we shouldn't share them with the world. Rather, we should hide them. They should remain a secret with us, because we are for them a garment. We are covering up their blemishes. Another thing that our clothes do is that they save us from the elements. If a person finds himself in a very hot place or in a very cold place, then he wears appropriate clothes for this. So if it's very cold outside, we'll wear enough clothing to save us from that cold. So similarly, in our husband or our wife, we find comfort during times of difficulty, during times of hardship. And so this is also a lesson for us, that we should be that comfort for our spouse, for our husband or our wife. If our spouse is going through a difficult period, then we should be supportive. We should be there for them. This should go without saying, but sometimes a reminder is necessary. Sometimes we forget the importance of being there for our husband or our wife. We may be there for our friend, but when it comes to our own family, we sometimes forget. So we should always ensure that any times of difficulty or hardship, if there's been a bereavement in the family, someone's passed away within the family, we provide comfort for one another. This is part of our role as a husband or a wife, because we are a garment for them, an item of clothing for them. We shield one another from difficulties and calamities, so that we're not affected too much by them. علم الله أنكم كنتم تختانون أنفسكم فتاب عليكم وعفى عنكم. So I mentioned that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, some of them were falling into this, where they were being intimate with their wives when they shouldn't be, because they couldn't help themselves. And then they felt really guilty about it as well. They were struggling with this. So then Allah says, Allah knows, alim Allah knows that you have been deceiving yourselves. فَتَابَ عَلَيْكُمْ. So He has shown mercy upon you. وَعَفَى عَنْكُمْ. And He has forgiven you. So if there were any mistakes that you made like that before, then Allah has shown mercy, He has forgiven you, and He has made it easier for you now. So you see the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know that a person is not burdened more than what he can bear. لا تزر وازرة وزر أخرى. And a person does not carry the burden of another person. لا تكلف نفس إلا وسعها. A person is not burdened anything more than what they can bear. So Allah Ta'ala recognized that these people were struggling, and so then He provided them with this ease. فَالْآنَ بَاشِرُوهُنَّ وَابْتَغُوا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. So now, approach them, meaning approach your wives. You may be intimate with them during the nights of Ramadan. وَابْتَغُوا مَا كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ. And seek what Allah has written for you in terms of children. And of course Allah Ta'ala tells us elsewhere in the Qur'an that Allah Ta'ala knows best if He is going to give someone a male child or a female child, or sometimes He gives both, sons and daughters, and sometimes He leaves a couple barren with no children. إِنَّهُ عَلِيٌّ حَكِيمٌ. Surely He is most high and He is most wise. If a person has no children, then of course he will make dua to Allah Ta'ala, oh Allah bless me with children. But of course, if he is destined to receive them, he will. But there may be, and of course there is, a great reason if a person is deprived of children. And Allah knows best what the wisdom behind it might be. And so we are reminded in that ayah that Allah is most high, He knows everything, and also He is most wise. He makes the wisest decisions. And He knows what is in our best interests. We don't. So Allah Ta'ala then says, وَكُلُوا وَاشْرَبُوا. And eat and drink. حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكُمُ الْخَيْطُ الْأَبْيَضُ مِنَ الْخَيْطِ الْأَسْوَدِ مِنَ الْفَجْرِ. And eat and drink. So remember when they were told that they couldn't eat after Isha, or if they had fallen asleep. So now Allah Ta'ala has told them another mercy from Him, that He is telling them, and eat and drink. You may eat and drink all night until the white thread becomes apparent from the black thread at the time of Fajr. Now, this, of course, a person with understanding may recognize what this means. But of course, we look at the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and there were people amongst them who were very intelligent. There were those who were able to pick things up straight away. There were those with great understanding and wisdom. There were others who took things very literally, which isn't necessarily a bad thing either. So there was a whole range of Sahaba radiallahu anhum. And So here what happens is that one particular Sahabi, Adi ibn Hatim, radiallahu anhu, what he does is he hears this ayah and he thinks, fine, okay, so I'm allowed to eat and drink all night until this white thread becomes distinct from the black thread. So what he does is he goes to sleep and he puts a white thread and a black thread under his pillow. And then he keeps watching them while eating. So he's eating away, drinking away all night, and he's just waiting for them to become apparent. Of course, it's very dark at night, so you can't really tell. So then he was eating and drinking way into the morning until he could actually see the two threads being different. So then he goes to the Prophet ﷺ, and then he recounts a story to him. And the Prophet ﷺ says to him that إِنَّ وِسَادَكَ إِذًا لَعَرِيض إِنَّ وِسَادَكَ إِذًا لَعَرِيض. Surely then, in that case, if this is what you did, surely in that case your pillow is vast. Because what this actually means is that the thread, each thread is actually the horizon. So when you look out into the distance and you see the sun coming up, or you see the first bit of light, so Subh Sadiq, when you see that first bit of light, that is the white thread. And it's becoming distinct from the black thread, which is of course darkness. So that is what is meant in this ayah. But of course, this Sahabi, he took that horizon to be just that small thread. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying to him in a joking way that in that case your pillow is vast, that it's encompassed the whole horizon. And then he said, إِنَّمَا ذَلِكَ بَيَاضُ النَّهَارِ مِنْ سَوَادِ اللَّيْلِ. Surely that, meaning the threads, are the whiteness of the day, which is distinct from the darkness of the night. So this is what is actually meant in this ayah. But this teaches us a great thing, that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they weren't perfect. Sometimes they made mistakes in their interpretations as well. But importantly, they always referred back to the Prophet ﷺ to ensure that anything that they had understood was actually correct. They didn't assume that everything they had understood was correct. So this is what he did. He did go back and he did inquire. There was also no shame. Notice here, a person might have been ashamed, or he might have thought, I've clearly done something quite silly with taking these threads. Maybe I'll be ridiculed or mocked. Maybe I shouldn't go and seek knowledge and seek clarification. But no, this is not the case either. If we have any misunderstandings or any concerns, or we're not sure about something, then we should seek clarification. We should seek clarification from the ulama. We should go to the scholars, ask people of understanding, people who have knowledge, to clarify these things for us. We shouldn't be ashamed. There was no shame in this. And once he had clarified, then it was fine. And of course, you also see how the Prophet ﷺ was joking with his Sahaba. He wasn't serious all the time. And indeed, the Prophet ﷺ was always smiling. He was someone who was always smiling. He laughed very infrequently. He didn't laugh very often. And we see examples in the Hadith where some of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum will specifically mention certain events where the Prophet ﷺ laughed to the point where people saw his teeth. Which means that he didn't do this very often, and it was noteworthy. But he was smiling all the time. So he was very pleasant to be around. And of course, Allah Ta'ala tells us elsewhere, وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. If you were, so Allah Ta'ala is saying to the Prophet ﷺ, if you were very harsh in your manner, and you were very hard-hearted, then the people would have run away from you. They wouldn't have spent time with you. But instead, look at how the Sahaba were drawn to him. Anyone who came and saw him, they loved him. And they never wanted to leave his company. And they would cry bitterly at having to leave him. This was because he was so polite and so pleasant to be around, And within reason, they would joke, they would laugh. And so this is what we see from the Prophet ﷺ and his Sahabi here, that he has made a joke here. And of course, it was all light-hearted, they may have laughed together. But then an important lesson was learned also in that this ayah was clarified. ثُمَّ أَتِمُّ الصِّيَامَ إِلَى اللَّيْلِ. So once this has happened, you've eaten and drunk all night, or however long you want, until you've seen that white thread becoming distinct from the black thread, meaning you've seen Subha Sadiq happen. Then after this, then أَتِمُّ الصِّيَامَ إِلَى اللَّيْلِ, complete the fasting until night, meaning until sunset. وَلَا تُبَاشِرُوهُنَّ وَأَنْتُمْ عَاكِفُونَ فِي الْمَسَاجِدِ. Now of course Allah Ta'ala has told us that a person may be intimate with his wife during the nights of Ramadan, but if a person is doing i'tikaf, then he must not do this. This will break his i'tikaf. He shouldn't do this. He shouldn't be intimate with his wife at that time, if he's doing i'tikaf. And of course, these days, alhamdulillah, in our masajid, we have all the facilities we need. We have our shower, we have a toilet, we have the necessary things that we need. But in those days, the masjid was simply the masjid. It was a very simple place. If a person needed to relieve themselves, then they needed to actually leave the confines of the masjid and go out, away from the masjid. And so at that point, then there was the opportunity to go home, for example. And even now, if a person absolutely has to go, then that's a separate issue. But those people, when they were doing i'tikaf in the masajid at the time, when they used to leave to relieve themselves or for whatever other necessity, then they were not allowed to be intimate with their wives during that time, even if it was at night. But that's during i'tikaf. تِلْكَ حُدُودُ اللَّهِ فَلَا تَقْرَبُوهَا. These are the boundaries of Allah. Do not go beyond them. Allah Ta'ala told them first how they should be fasting. Of course, they made mistakes, they're human, but after this, He made it easier for them. And He provided clarity, and this is one of the mercies of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Because if we look at what the Sahaba used to do at the beginning when fasting was made obligatory, then it wasn't very clear. So there are some riwayat, some narrations that say that they used to stop eating. They used to stop eating when they used to go to sleep. Some say that no, they as soon as they prayed Isha, they had to stop. Some say that they were allowed to be intimate with their wives until Isha, between Maghrib and Isha, and afterwards they weren't. Some say that no, they weren't allowed during the whole of Ramadan. But this ayah has provided clarity. So there's no confusion. Because something as important as fasting needs clarity. And Allah has provided it here, and this is from His mercy. And so then Allah Ta'ala makes it clear. He says, these are the boundaries of Allah. So do not even come close to them. Another great lesson for us. That there are things that are haram. There are things that are forbidden. We know they are forbidden. So we shouldn't even go close to them. Because if a person goes close to something, then it's possible he will fall into it. If a person, and in the hadith it comes, that if a person goes close to a boundary, so if he grazes his animals close to a boundary, then there's a very good chance that his animals will then cross the boundary and graze in the next person's land. So similarly, if a person knows that something is haram, he should avoid it completely. To the point where if a person has any doubts about something, that something is allowed or not, then it's better to avoid it. So do not even come close to the boundaries of Allah Ta'ala. So for example, zina is forbidden. So then, you shouldn't even go close to it. And going close to it would mean looking towards something that's forbidden, or touching something that's forbidden, and so on. Because ultimately these things will lead to the ultimate evil act, which is haram. كَذَلِكَ يُبَيِّنُ اللَّهُ آيَاتِهِ لِلنَّاسِ. So we will agree that here Allah has clarified things. So then he says here, in this way Allah makes things clear to you. He makes His signs clear to you. He makes them apparent to you, to the people, to mankind. لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَّقُونَ. So that they might fear, so that they might have taqwa. And this is the recurring theme we heard last week about the importance of fasting when it comes to taqwa, when it comes to bringing taqwa into our lives. So here again Allah Ta'ala tells us how we should be fasting, and then He tells us about the importance of His boundaries and not to go close to them, how to fear that we might actually cross the boundaries, and then He says, so that you might achieve taqwa, the fear of Allah. So then Allah Ta'ala, now another lesson we have here is that those people, the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, they did not do suhoor, they didn't do sahri. Of course at the beginning they weren't allowed to. Once they had gone to sleep or prayed Isha, that was it. There was no sahri. But out of the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have been given the opportunity to have sahri. So a person who simply says, that's it, I'm not going to wake up for sahri, he is showing ingratitude even. He is not being grateful. If he, out of laziness, he chooses not to get up for sahri, he's not being grateful for this mercy that he has been given. And indeed the Prophet ﷺ has encouraged us to partake of sahri. And he says that the thing that differentiates our fasting from the fasting of those who came before us is the sahri. They never used to do it before. The previous the previous nations, they never had this sahri or suhoor. But we have it, alhamdulillah. And we see that the Prophet ﷺ has also said, لا تزال أمتي بخير ما عجلوا الإفطار وأخروا السحور. That my ummah will remain in goodness, in a good state, as long as they do iftar quickly and they delay their suhoor. Meaning that when it's time for iftar, when it's time to break their fast, they break it quickly. They break it on time. They don't wait. And they delay their suhoor for as long as possible until the last time that they can take it. And we see in the hadith, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, so some of the people who came afterwards used to ask the Sahaba radiallahu anhum that how long was the gap between suhoor, between stopping eating and the time of Surah Sadiq, and they used to say the time it takes to recite 50 ayat. Take this as you understand it, 50 ayat. So this would be at a reasonable pace. Wallahu a'lam. But this basically isn't a very long time. It's not hours. So it tells us that they used to eat until the end time. Also we see in the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ has said, suhoor is barakah. It is a blessing. It's barakah. So don't leave it, even if you have one gulp of water. Even if it is one gulp of water, even if you just get up, have a gulp of water and that's your suhoor. Even this is blessed. And this is because the angels send blessings upon those people who are doing suhoor. We are in need of this, of course. We are in need of the barakat, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are in need of the salawat received from the angels. We are in need of all of this. Because who knows, that one blessing may be enough to enter us into Jannah. Who knows? And so we are in need of all of this. So if this is what it takes, then why not? And it's for our benefit. Why should we deprive ourselves of food and drink when Allah wants us to eat and drink? If He has made it halal for us, we should. Another thing we learn here is that we shouldn't use our brains too much when it comes to fasting, when it comes to ibadat generally. A person may think that if they fast for a really, really long time, so the longer they fast, the more reward they will get. But this is not the case. You will only receive maximum reward when you do things according to the sunnah of the Prophet, according to the rulings. If you start making things up from your own mind, thinking, yes, I will fast for an extra 10 minutes and do iftar 10 minutes later, so I get 10 minutes more reward. No. If anything, the person who does iftar on time, he will receive more reward because he has done things properly according to how it should be done. So with things like this, we shouldn't use our minds, we shouldn't try to be too clever. Because Islam provides us with answers regarding things that our intellect cannot reach. And so we should always do things according to how they should be done and not make things up as we go along. And then in the next ayah, Allah Ta'ala tells us about wealth. Because of course we've been talking about food and drink, and we've heard in previous weeks about the importance of eating halal. So then here Allah Ta'ala tells us that, and do not eat wealth between you with evil. Meaning, don't take other people's wealth. Don't usurp other people's property. Because what some people used to do, and they still do, subhanAllah, is they will make a false claim and then they will go to the judge and they may give a bribe, for example, and in this way they will get their claim. And this is, of course, evil, it's wrong, but many people will do this. So Allah Ta'ala is making it clear here that you shouldn't be doing this. But He also says here, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا أَمْوَالَكُمْ بَيْنَكُمْ بِالْبَاطِلِ, and do not eat your wealth between you with evil. Because of course, ultimately, this wealth that you have taken, even if it is haram, even if you've taken someone else's property, what are you going to do with it? You're going to buy some food, for example, and eat it. And that will then form flesh that has been made from haram wealth. And then with that flesh you will perform your salah, you will fast, you will do all of these things. How can we expect our actions to be rewarded, to be accepted? So do not eat your wealth between you with evil. وَتُدْلُوا بِهَا إِلَى الْحُكَّامِ, and do not give bribes to your leaders or to the judges. لِتَأْكُلُوا فَرِيقًا مِنْ أَمْوَالِ النَّاسِ بِالْإِثْمِ. Don't give bribes like this so that you might win the case which you have falsely brought, so that you might eat some of the wealth of the people wrongly, بِالْإِثْمِ, with sin. وَأَنْتُمْ تَعْلَمُونَ, and yet you have full knowledge of this. If a person does this out of ignorance, meaning if a person mistakenly does this, then Allah knows best. He knows what our hearts conceal, He knows our intentions. But if a person does this knowingly, then there is a grave sin. And there's a hadith which clarifies things here. A hadith narrated by Salama radiallahu anha, where she says that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Surely I am a human like you." The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, "I am a human." And when a case comes, because many people used to argue and then they would bring their case to him, he would be the judge. So he says, "I am human. So when a case comes to me, it may be the case that one of you sells his case better." And this is how things are. Some people are more eloquent than others, some people are able to tell their case better than others. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying, one of you may be more convincing in his arguments. So then I will perhaps judge it for him. I will do what I can, according to the information that is in front of me. But, and then he gives a warning, if a judgment is given against the true person. Meaning, if the judgment is given by him, and it's given in favor of the person falsely asking for something, then that wealth that that person is claiming for is a piece of fire. So then it's up to him. He may carry that fire, he may take it home with him, and he may benefit, or he may try to benefit from it, but ultimately this is fire and it will harm him, or he may leave it. So even then, at that point, it might be worthwhile him saying, no, I actually don't want this because this was a false claim from me, and I don't want this. Because even then he will be saved. So this is a grave sin, to take another person's wealth, another person's property, falsely take this. And notice how Allah Ta'ala has brought this ayah regarding wealth and eating this wealth, meaning eating the food that is bought with this haram wealth, straight after the bayan, the description of the fasting, reminding us that even if a person fasts all day and then he eats for his iftar and his suhoor, if his food is not from halal, if the food that he is feeding his family is not from halal, then this will not benefit him. It will only harm him. So alhamdulillah, we'll leave it at that. So what we've done today, we covered from ayah 187 to 188 of Surah Al-Baqarah. Is there any questions about what we've covered, inshallah?
Just one question. Just regarding that thread business that you're talking about, because I read somewhere, as long as you can identify the white thread during the night, that's when you stop eating. So if you haven't got a clock with you, you're not sure what time to stop eating, and you've got a thread, and as long as you can't see that, then you can continue to eat until you can see it. And that is the limit that you can stop eating.
Right.
Is that right, or is it?
So the question is about the threads, the white thread and the black thread.
Yes.
And so this was actually a metaphor. There's no thread involved at all, actually. So Allah Ta'ala is using this figurative language to describe the horizon, about how it looks like a thread. When the light is coming up, in Surah Sadiq you see a very faint light, and it's like a faint white thread on the horizon. That's what is being described here. There's no thread involved at all. But that Sahabi, Adi ibn Hatim, he was mistaken. He took it literally, whereas he shouldn't have done, but Allahu A'lam. He took it literally, and so then he looked at the two threads, and so he was mistaken in this way. But this was clarified by the Prophet ﷺ when he said, no, it's not about the threads at all. It's when the Subh Sadiq comes up, that's when you stop eating. So when it comes to, if you don't have a clock, then still, if you're in a place where you can see the horizon and you're able to view the Subh Sadiq, then that's fine. Of course, it's very difficult during the summer months, and there's a whole debate about this. But the threads aren't involved here.
Yeah. I'm sure I was told that that was the two ways of telling. One was to see the chirping of the birds. And yes, if you hear the chirping of the bird, you stop eating. That's one of the ways you can tell if you ain't got no clock, something like that. And the other way was that if you can identify a white thread, then it means you've got to stop eating. That was the two ways of
The difficulty with the thread thing would be that people's eyesight is different.
Yeah.
And also the levels of lighting will be different as well. But no, it's basically a Subh Sadiq.